welcome to the Huddle Breakdown with me, Laura Bradburn. I'm joined as always by James and Alan. James, we were so into what we were talking about there and geeking out over stats and stuff, we thought we should probably press record on this and actually record it for safekeeping.
Yeah, I need to get my head back into the geek framing, because I was Mr. Romance over the weekend. You know, it was Valentine's Day weekend, Laura. So, you know, I mean, when you're married to me, you get a full weekend of blissful romance. So that's
every cell of the spreadsheet is full.
That's right. So I had to get back into my headspace the last couple of days.
Are you quite as romantic as that, Alan?
Fairly. It was a nice weekend, but yeah, we were as you say geeking out, and it's going to be like the recording session tapes or something. We're going to have to release as a separate album. You know, when we run out of new material, we'll do the outtakes and the bits you didn't get to hear, the geeky conversations that happen off camera.
Yeah, and all the times that I say, oh, wouldn't it be good if somebody recorded that bit of data, and Alan invariably says they already do and then shows me it. And it's like, yeah, okay, fair enough. Let's get started then. So a lot's happened since the last time I was on, but the most pertinent part of that is that we obviously came back from 2-0 down to beat Kilmarnock 3-2 at the weekend. Julian Arajo became a fan for all of a couple of minutes and nearly kind of caused a riot in the away end at Rugby Park, but it was good to see. It leaves us on 54 points with Rangers above us on 55 and Hearts on 57, but we do have that game in hand from the delayed game against Aberdeen, so fingers crossed with that one. James, I'll come to you first. Your overall thoughts on the Kilmarnock game before we get into some of the nitty-gritty on that one?
Yeah, you know, what's the saying about the sun shines on a dog's ass, or broken clocks right twice a day? There's all kinds of great ways to frame it. But yeah, come on, Alan. But yeah, in our preview,
dog's ass is right twice a day.
Twice a day, yes. Or you can just call me a dog's ass or a horse's ass. I get that too. But no, it kind of played out, you know, on a rare occasion the way we kind of thought it would. Meaning that Kilmarnock under McCann have been very open, hemorrhaging chances by the opposition and hemorrhaging goals. He's been trying to play a more kind of proactive ball-playing style of play, and it was a tale of two halves. They got a lot more joy going that route in the first half, and then they kind of devolved into what they've been experiencing pretty regularly under his tenure, which is the hemorrhaging goals part. And I think, you know, it's one of those games where I saw the lineup and you're like, what are we doing here? And then fortunately we addressed some of that at halftime. I think the changes that were made at half were smart ones and made a material difference. So yeah, I mean, all of our kind of underlying issues remain, I think. The issues in midfield commonsensically have gotten worse because of Arne Engel's absence, and I think that was on full display. So yeah, not a whole lot of surprise other than maybe the sequencing of it and how awful we were in the first half, I think, on a relative basis, given the fact that we were playing a team that, you know, we really should be tearing apart consistently with how front-footed they've been playing. But no, you know, again, exciting. That's as far as entertainment quotient go, you don't get much better than the last couple of weeks. So it's good way to cap off that 2-week period.
Indeed, and we might get into a bit of a discussion about our propensity for scoring late goals a little bit later in the show, because it does seem to be becoming a bit of a theme. But Alan, well, first of all, James, I want to pick you up on the fact that Arne Engels being injured is a major miss, because if you read Celtic Twitter, he doesn't do anything. He's not a good footballer, apparently. So I don't know where people get that from.
I've been in the Arne Engels critic camp on many occasions, but it's an issue of relative, right? Relative to, so he was never really the profile of player that I thought we should sign, irregardless of cost. But out of the options that we have available, I think particularly the way Martin O'Neill has been deploying him, I think is by some distance, unless Oxlade-Chamberlain is going to be, able to play 95 plus minutes, or according to Rangers Twitter, 150 minutes per game, the way they're adjusting the time of extra time, apparently, then, I just don't see another version of a midfield that is anywhere near what we have with Engels, the way he's being deployed or has been under Martin O'Neill.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about Rangers or anybody associated with them's interpretation of numbers. They've never been very good with that stuff. But Alan, I'll come to you. I guess we should focus on the first half initially because, the performance was pretty abysmal. James touched on some of the reasons why. I guess my question to you would be, how much of that was down to what Kilmarnock were doing and how much of that was down to what we were doing or not doing?
Yeah, trying to avoid being not giving the opposition credit. And I think I was quite surprised by Kilmarnock, I'll be honest. I thought they played really, really good football in that first half. A lot of passing moves, a lot of attacking, getting numbers forward. They generally committed 3 players forward at all times. And that was with Finlay Curtis, who's really a striker, or certainly he's a forward player, as part of their midfield 3, which would be us, a bit like us playing Negrin as midfield, frankly. So they were brave, I would say, and they were ambitious, and they created a lot of chances, 17 shots. Not all of them were great, clearly. And they scored some nice goals. And the guy, John Jules, you sort of look at someone like him, you sort of think, well, why are we signing Adamu and Kranchara when there's somebody like that who was a free agent? I mean, his record is not great, less than, I don't know, about 10 goals and over 100 League One, League Two type appearances. But for whatever reason, whether he's a late developer, he certainly was a handful. I don't think he's got hardly any pace. I think that's probably the major issue, and why somebody like Celtic would not countenance that. But he played well. So I don't want to be churlish, but you have to say Celtic were dreadful, were absolutely dreadful, and contributed to Kilmarnock's ability to play through Celtic so easily. That was one. There was two metrics. I looked at all the Kilmarnock games I've got on record, so going back 10 years, 11 years. There's one that I don't mention very often because there's hundreds of the damn thing, called final third efficiency, which is essentially the amount of times you get into the final third and do something with it, as in you might, even if it's just win a corner or keep possession or get, ideally get a shot away or something like that. And normally that's around 25-30%. Well, for Kilmarnock for this game, it was 44%. It was the highest they've ever recorded against Celtic. So what that means is it was very easy for them to turn final third possession into something good, whether it be a corner or a shot. And 17 shots kind of tells you that. So that was a notable one. And the other one was just coming back to the packing. The number of Celtic defenders that they packed was I think equalled the highest that I've got on record. And this is for games at Rugby Park, not all games against Kilmarnock. And again, that speaks to the ease at which they could play through the Celtic. Celtic were just far too easy to play against. And if you've got a midfield constituted of Callum McGregor, Rio Hatate, and Benjamin Negrin, that isn't a surprise. And similarly, when you are almost wholly reliant on creativity to your fullbacks, and then you don't be surprised when you're vulnerable to the ball over the top of them, which is what happened for the first goal. Certainly, it was far too easy to play over the top of Arajo. He was trying his best to support the forward area because that's what we're doing under O'Neill. We're getting the ball wide, trying to get crosses into the box, etc. And we're vulnerable to the ball in behind the fullbacks. And if you pull Austin Trusty and Liam Scales out onto the byline, I mean, 90% of centre halves do not want to be in that situation. They both looked very hesitant and slow, whether they were feeling that they couldn't be aggressive in their pressing, in their closing down on that surface, because obviously the bigger bloke you are, the heavier you are, the harder it is to change direction on a surface like that if you commit to an aggressive press. And certainly, both goals, Trusty was way off. He just wasn't closing down quick enough. That's also partly down to the nature of defending, I think, these days. I mean, I do despair. We're right old da when it comes to the quality of defenders, because for 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 15, 20 years, we've football teams at the highest level have prioritised ball playing defenders. And so the art of defending is something that's slowly dying out. You kind of want one of these old school Italian defenders that will literally die rather than let someone put a cross in the box. Because somebody like Austin Trusty has got all the physical attributes to be a top defender, other than he's not a killer. He's not a killer. He won't kill or be killed to stop somebody getting a shot or a cross away. And for whatever reason, both defenders, that was apparent on that day. So too easy to play through. The pressing from the front was obviously abysmal. So getting through that initial press was straightforward. Adamu doesn't look like he's much of a presser, really, unfortunately. And Hatate, he just sauntered around as per. Negrin, again, it's not his game to be patrolling midfield, throwing himself into tackles. You asked about Engels earlier. Why is Engels such a big miss? Playing him as a double pivot, so a bit deeper in midfield with McGregor, not only protects McGregor, so that's a defensive strengthening exercise. You're not asking him to be Matt O'Reilly, which is what Rodgers and everyone else asked him to be, So we're not telling him to do stupid things that he can't do, such as play intricate passes on the edge of the box, be the one that is feeding people through with cute little passes and all that sort of stuff. He's not good at that. Don't ask him to do it. But what Engels does, because he's a smart kid and he's a good footballer, is he's positionally solid. He knows where to be, and he just gives the team structure. He gives the team balance. He gives the team shape. These are all a bit nebulous terms, but they mean something. If anyone who's played football knows, you've got to have solidity in the team. You've got to have a structure, and he gives the team that. So he's not glamorous, and he's as James says, he's still not the style of player that's going to flourish in a Celtic team. But at the moment, given how weak the squad is, the fact that he's a good footballer, but meaning he makes intelligent choices, he knows where to stand, he knows where to be, and high percentage of defending is simply knowing where to stand. It's just standing in the right place. And bright footballers know where to stand. And if you can do that, you don't need to be a Roy Keane. You don't need to be a Patrick Vieira to be an effective defender. You just need to know where to stand all the time. And Engels does. And Hatate and Negrin don't in a defensive setup. So that's what Negrin gives us. And it therefore gives the team a platform, as they say, to use the cliche, and a structure that then allows the other players, especially Negrin, to break into the box without having to worry about, oh my God, I've got to get back and stand next to McGregor now, which is what they were asking him to do. So he's herring up and down the pitch like this. Hatate's sort of sauntering around. Nightmare. So this is writ large. It was writ large exactly why this is an issue, because we were too easy to play through. And then add in the fact that we're reliant on the two fullbacks, and then the space that leaves out, and then add in the skittishness of the centre-backs, who both had a nightmare and just were too slow all day. And then add in, another Schmeichel error. That had all those things together on top of each other. The old Jenga tower comes crashing down in that first half. And that was the team that was selected. And James rightly says it was remedied with substitutions. But then you're going to accept the praise for that. You've got to accept the brickbats for picking that team in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, you've pretty much hit the nail on the head with everything you said about that first half. The bit that had me screaming at the telly was Araujo pushing up and Trusty and Scales getting pulled out wide, because you could tell whether they identified it before the game or whether they identified it in game. It was clear to me that Kilmarnock had noticed that and were targeting it down that side, a lot of the stuff that they were doing, and fair play to them for doing that. James, looking at the second half, Alan's touched on the substitutions that were made. They were very effective. What did they and the change of style of play bring in the second half that actually got us the win? Because there was no doubt that the performance in the second half was very different to the first.
Yeah, I thought one of the lineup aspects that when I saw the initial team sheet that I was a little concerned about was the lack of Tanecki being involved because of the fullbacks that McCann selected for Kilmarnock. I mean, they're more resolute. They're not the most laterally quick or flat out pacey, and so that's the type of fullback that Tanecki's gotten a lot of joy against. He tends to be a little bit, when someone's as quick as him or quicker, his 1v1 abilities can get diluted a little bit. So, when he's playing against a team like Kilmarnock, he really gets the ball up the pitch and he can get into the box. And even independent of the screamer that he scored, which was, obviously a great finish, he was just getting us up into dangerous areas and helping with the pressure. And that him with Oxlade-Chamberlain and what Oxlade-Chamberlain brings, and this is when I did my benchmarking exercise when we signed him, the aspect that most encouraged me was the degree with which he was likely to help us in build-up and in final third possession with just quality on the ball. So all the things that Alan just said that we shouldn't, and part of the credit to Martin O'Neill for not expecting Arne Engels to be that refined on the ball midfielder. That's basically what Chamberlain brings. And so I think that, he's not so far anyway, and given his pedigree, hopefully expect him not to be as erratic as Hatate. And that's even when Hatate is fully committed, and, who knows where his headspace is at given what he's looked like the last bit in the games that he's played. So I think that made, a major difference. And then, having some depth, we talked about this. One of the biggest things about getting Srirachi back and getting some of these players in the window, Chvankara coming on, is having some level of depth, some resilience in the squad, so that if you need to make some changes or, you just need to rotate and manage minutes, that you've got some players that are of quality that can help in that regard. So I thought those were the two big ones in Chamberlain and Tanecki. And again, not that Tanecki set the world on fire or, but he can at least get the ball up the pitch, whereas Maeda's kind of a one-hit wonder. And I mean that, Maeda makes some decent first touch crosses at times, very threatening when those balls in behind, but he's not the guy that's going to pick it up around the midway line and dribble up and, take it up to the end line and cut it back, or even do, intricate interchanges with Oxlade-Chamberlain on the wide left, right? That's just not going to be who Maeda is. So I thought bringing on those dynamics on the left really kind of helped settle things down. But, again, the concern here is how scalable is Oxlade-Chamberlain. And if he's not, and when I say scalable, I mean, can he start and can he play 90 minutes twice a week? That's the concern, is that while he's on the pitch, I think he does make a huge difference, but how often is he going to be able to stay on the pitch?
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm desperate for to happen, even with the little glimpses I've seen of Oxlade-Chamberlain, is that he does sign for a full season next season. He gets a pre-season under his belt, because I think at least domestically he'll provide us with some moments of magic that, like the one against Livingston, that will see us get through some games that might otherwise be a bit of a challenge. But the thing I was going to ask you, just because you mentioned it, James, Tanecki, and Alan, feel free to weigh in on this if you like. There's a bit of me that wonders whether the decision to bring him on later on in games is a deliberate decision from Martin O'Neill. The fact that he does take his man on, perhaps he's deliberately trying to wait until the fullbacks are tired out to bring Tanecki on and kind of terrorise them at that point. Is that a strategy that you think he could be employing, or is it a little bit more nuanced than that?
I think that would be a reasonable idea to pursue. My concern in this game specifically was because Oxlade-Chamberlain wasn't able, or they're not ready to start him yet. The midfield composition as it was, to have Maeda, Adamu, who's not really a build-up or a hold-up striker, and Yang, you basically have chaos ball. You don't have someone that's just going to get the ball, hold it, and progress it. And I thought that's what Taneki in that game to me represented, was some level of control in possession. And when you added Oxlade Chamberlain, I thought those two on the same side as Tierney and Srirachi. But before you go down, the other thing I want to mention, because I'm getting old and I forget these things if I don't mention them when I remember them. Huge credit for 2 long throw-ins. And, we've been railing on set pieces forever now. And so we have to point out that when we take long throws, which I don't know where these came from in the final third, long may they continue. One probably wasn't technically a long throw to Chvankara. I mean, it was, more of a traditional, throw it to a big guy posting up than it was just a brazen get it in the mixer kind of long throw, which, the Negrin goal was. So I don't know if that's a new strategy, whether that was an impulse decision that players made, but applaud it, because that's a good way to put risk into the game in a position on the pitch that can be very damaging to the opposition, as we've felt. We just talked about at the Livingston game how smart they had been in utilizing the long throw against us. So it was nice to see us deploy it for a change.
Alan, it's interesting that James brings that up, because, the long throw, as everything is in football, has become a bit in fashion, in vogue at the moment, and every team seems to have their guy who becomes the long thrower, and it is being treated almost as another kind of set piece, as dangerous as a corner if it's in the right position, or as dangerous as a free kick near the box. I guess combining that with set pieces in general, how much more do you think we could be getting out of set pieces than we are? Because, okay, defending them, we're absolutely terrible, but we're not fantastic at getting goals out of them either.
I know that's the perception, and every season I think the perception is broadly the same, that you don't score enough goals from corners and we concede too many. Every season I go through the same exercise and I do all the stats for the whole season, and it's slightly better or slightly worse than it was the season before. There's no real huge outlier so much. I think this season will be a little bit different. I think there's more at both ends actually from set pieces. But what I agree with James. I read that was something one of my takeaways from the game actually. I think it was deliberate. We were so consistently throwing the ball low. So if you think back to Thomas Grunemark, quicker, longer, smarter, whatever it was, and we under the last Rodgers, Postecoglou, the impetus was always to be quick and to keep possession. Those were the 2 priorities. So we always played it backwards, square, short, mainly backwards, and keep possession, but do it quickly. Now we seem to be just going long. And both Araujo, who seems to have a decent throw on him as well, and Tierney, who has come back from Arsenal with big muscles, big English Premier League muscles, we're just going long basically all the time now. More so in this game, but I've seen it creeping up game by game. So it's a real feature now. And like with the Negrin goal, if you ask defenders of the caliber of Kilmarnock to do stuff, under pressure, you're more likely to get errors, right? I mean that. So there is merit in it. It's not necessarily pretty. You might end up with more throw-ins to them, more goal kicks. They can then waste time. The ball's not in play as often. You don't have possession for as long as you would normally. These are all the downsides to this. But we saw the upside with the Negrin goal, where essentially it was a long throw into the box. Celtic player didn't get near it. Kilmarnock player tried to clear it. Hit one of his own players, bounced to Negrin. Chaos ball. Yeah, that's how Hearts, Rangers have scored loads of goals like that this season. So there's no snobbery about it. No, I'll take any goal. Happy for it to come that way. Vary it up. Why not get it in the mixer in that sense? And especially with the issues that Celtic have with build-up, especially with the issue of the quality of the wide players, I think it makes sense to be adding in that dimension to the play. Absolutely. There was a couple of things I think that just more features of the second half. So I think I rightly gave McCann and Kilmarnock praise for their first half performance, but in the second half they did revert back to playing it long and just hoofing the ball, and that second half became a very transitional game, and the number of recoveries and turnovers was huge relative to the first half, which was a bit basketball-y, but it was both teams kind of taking the ball up the park, more like basketball rather than just losing it all the time and recycling it. And I think Celtic forced that just by playing a little bit quicker, and and Kilmarnock weren't able to keep their passing game going under that little bit more pressure. And we had more effective pressers on the pitch. And Oxlade-Chamberlain, part of being good on the ball is he just simply moved the ball quicker. Not just the fact that he was accurate; he's accurate, and he does it quicker than anyone else as well, because of the level that he's used to playing and has done throughout his career. So those things all helped. I didn't think McCann dealt with that particularly well, and his team almost lost control of it. Forrest came on, and although he wasn't very impressive, and although he in some ways sadly really looked his age, what he did do is he brought more control to the attack. Because even after Celtic scored the equaliser, Kilmarnock had loads of chances, loads of shots. They dominated on volume of shots after we got the equaliser, which means that from 64 minutes, halfway through the half, we hadn't actually built a control in the game. That control only came really when Forrest came on. And then it was in the last sort of 14, 15 minutes after he came on that Celtic basically dominated the ball and dominated the shots. So again, he's a smart player, he's an intelligent footballer, he keeps the ball, he recycles it, etc. Just that facet gave Celtic more of a foothold in those last 10 minutes. The other thing, which I don't know was picked up, but that was slightly good fortune from Celtic's perspective, but I think bad management by McCann, was one of the many lengthy stoppages in the second half. It was on the 90th minute. I think it was Araujo or Forrest, can't remember which one, smashed a cross in, and it hit the left back, Thompson, right in the face. Bang, it went down, and it was about a minute and a half, minute and three quarters he was down. I don't think he ever recovered from that. And when I was watching him, I don't know if you remember, he had a moment where he tried to shield the ball out of his own penalty area, and he started
Yep.
shielding it about on the edge of the penalty area, and just about got to the other end of the penalty area, and then James Forrest nipped in and stole it, and Celtic won a corner, sorry. And there was another one where I think Araujo was he won the ball back, Thompson, and he was trying to got the pitch, and he just kept running towards the touchline. He just ran out of play, and Celtic therefore got a throw in. So that contributed to Celtic being able to keep the pressure on, keep the momentum on. And that lad, I think he was concussed. I really do. To some level, I think he was concussed. And because when you looked at him, he didn't look in good shape at all. And he kept bending over. He kept putting his hands on his knees. He looked a bit glazed. There was these errors that allowed Celtic to keep the pressure on. And then for the goal, he was somewhere in the middle of he was almost in his own net, and it was the centre midfielder they brought on that was supposed to be, pressing Araujo on the shot, because it was in the left back position that the winning goal came from. So the fact that Kilmarnock didn't, because they had a concussion substitution left, they could have made an extra substitution. They'd done 5 subs, but you're allowed a concussion sub, so he could have actually been substituted. So I think that was a terrible mistake by Kilmarnock, and a bit of fortune for Celtic. And I think it had a material impact on being able to, firstly, keep the pressure on, and secondly, I think it was material to the goal coming from that part of the field where Thompson would have been defending. So these are the things that we've criticised Celtic in the past for not dealing with injured players well enough on during a game, and that was I think again, I don't want to, I can't prove that. Obviously, I'm going by what I saw and what I felt watching it. It's just a feeling, but that was my opinion on it. And as I say, the way that he was a bit erratic in his movement, and when he was put under pressure and had to move quickly, he was almost like he was stumbling, and he couldn't make decisions. He couldn't get his legs moving, which is all sort of either he's very tired, which he could, I'm sure he would have been as well, and or he was not 100% with it as far as having that face blow, in the 90th minute. So anyway, so My overarching thing, though, is I don't mind. Listen, who doesn't love last-minute winners? It's brilliant, etc. But it was last-minute winners on the back of. I'm sure all the people that watch this show play Championship Manager and Football Manager and all that. The classic Championship Manager game where you have 15 shots and the opposition have one, and you're 1-0 down, and then you score an own goal, so you lose 2-0, and they've had one shot, and you've had like 20. I mean, we've all played with that game 100 times on Championship Manager. If we're winning through this sort of last-minute drama, and it's that sort of scenario, I'm kind of fine with that because that's just how football goes sometimes. But it isn't. We were 2-0 down because we were rubbish. We were really poor. We were struggling against Dundee because we didn't play well. We were struggling against Livingston because we didn't play well. So this is the concern, I think, really. We have to be realistic about this. We've played the three bottom teams in the league, and although they're all fighting for their lives, and I think they've all, well, certainly Dundee and Kilmarnock have probably improved a little bit over the season. Um, these are the teams that Celtic, if you want to be champions, you need to be controlling the game, winning it 2-3-0, being comfortable, just boring, but winning with ease. And we're miles away from that. So that's the challenge. And the thing that's concerning me the most, as I say, is this gap in midfield. We need to find a way to creatively plug it.
Yeah, do you know, I love listening to Alan being so articulate and in-depth with what he says, and then he goes, we were 2-0 down to Kilmarnock because we were rubbish. Like, that's where I can get on board. I totally agree.
It wasn't luck. It wasn't luck, though, was it? It wasn't luck. We weren't 2-0 down at half-time because of the Championship Manager scenario. We were 2-0 down because it was a 50-50 game. They took their chances, rightly so. Our goalkeeper made errors. Our centre-back made errors. That's why we were losing, because we weren't very good.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that did make me laugh after the game, though, was I saw a post-match interview with Neil McCann, and he, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something like, I mean, I'm not angry, and then proceeded to display exactly how angry he was about the whole scenario. So that did make me chuckle.
His face, I mean, Araujo's moments were brilliant after that goal, sitting in the crowd. His reaction when he got the yellow card, and then at the end when he shook Neil McCann's hand was just beautiful.
yeah,
McCann's face was just a picture. Just made the day.
I said that to my dad. I said, if Araujo does nothing else in a Celtic shirt, he has earned cult status for life after that. Yeah. And like you say, not just for the goal, but everything he did in the aftermath was absolutely brilliant. And it's interesting that you mentioned about Thompson, the left back, because I had commented watching the game how good a game I thought he was having and noticed the drop-off, but I didn't correlate it with the knock to the head. But now that you mention it, it really does make sense. And I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. Concussion protocols, James, you'll know that there's so much work being done on that in the NFL as well. I follow Chris Nowinski on Twitter. He's an ex-WWE wrestler who's now got a PhD in concussion science, or whatever the phrase is. Like, this is a real serious issue that we need to take seriously. And I saw a player in Spain, actually, at the weekend getting taken off in tears because he was adamant that he could continue, and the medical staff quite rightly said, you cannot continue, you have to come off. Because I think people forget as well that when you're dealing with concussions like that, you're not only dealing with the physical impact of it, but you're dealing with the fact that regardless of what a person says, if they've got a significant enough concussion, then they aren't actually mentally able to make the decision as to whether they continue or not. But yeah, no, I just thought it was an interesting point that you made, and I think it was a fair enough one. James, looking at the last minute goal from Araujo, there is a narrative that has sprung up around our propensity for winning games that way. Obviously, Oxlade-Chamberlain got the goal against Livingston in 90+1. It was 90+7 or something like that for Araujo. Not something that we want to make a habit of, but how significant do you think it is that we've now had to rely on that a few times this season? And is it an indicator for you of the way that we're playing in general?
Well, I think it's a product of a couple of things. The first thing is you have to be behind in order to, or being, or drawing a game late in the game in order for some of these dynamics to take place. And having been the overwhelmingly dominant side in recent years, just on balance, we don't come into those circumstances all that often. So I think, generally speaking, that the one analogy that kind of struck me was in the because it lines up on a lot of different dimensions. Was the 2018-19 season. So we beat Kilmarnock 1-0 in the second to last game of Rogers' tenure. On I think it was a 90th minute or something, Scott Brown goal to beat Kilmarnock at Rugby Park 1-0. So I think that was February 17th of 2019. And then in Neil Lennon's first game in charge, I think it's a 92nd minute winner that I think most of us remember, the great cross that Edouard puts away, and Lennon, run around like a lunatic in a good way. And then a couple of weeks later, we score a 96th minute winner against Dundee to beat Dundee in Dundee 1-0. Okay. And if you look at from the date of that Kilmarnock victory, the 1-0 on February 17th, to the end of the season, that was 13 games. And the non-penalty XG difference, sorry, people, that's our currency that we deal in here, was about 0.8. So a lot of people say, I certainly remember it this way, that we kind of just grin and bared it to get over the line to get the league won that season. And wasn't a lot of sterling football. And I think we lost the Rangers post-split, and we had 3 draws during that stretch. And then several of these kind of nip and tuck close fixtures. Well, if we win points between now and the end of the season at a similar rate as we did during that stretch, we'll finish with 82 points. So is that going to be enough to win the league? I don't know. But that we're kind of at that similar non-penalty XG level, and we have been for a while now this season. And I think that team was much more talented, by the way, than the current one that we have. I think that the opposition is much better this season than, particularly the depth of quality in this league is much more threatening. That was the first season of Steven Gerrard, where Rangers were on the ascent, but not really quite there yet. And then after them, it was crap, generally. Now we've got quality Motherwell, quality Falkirk, Rangers, I would argue, on the ascent, and Hearts still kind of lingering. We're not sure what Hearts is going to end up being here, but
Hibs are decent as well.
And Hibs, you can't write. Hibs is better than any of those other teams. Hibs is probably closer to what Rangers were that season. So we have 3 teams above that level as part of this, league, but also most importantly post-split, where we're going to have to face all of these teams again. So the reason why I go through that analogy is because, number one, it's late goals that were huge and important in a title race. But even in that optimistic scenario, if we keep performing like this, I think this league is going to be more difficult because of that relative parity, and because we don't have as much talent. We don't have Odsonne Edouard to score those 2 goals in this league, and this, regardless of what people think of Odsonne Edouard. I mean, I think he's the head striker in the top, either number 1 or number 2 in Ligue A right now in France. Those that have lost track of Edouard's career, I think it's Lens he's at. So, good football, really good player, better than anyone that we have a striker right now, I would argue, by some distance. So I just think it's a lot more perilous right now if the status quo continues, and maybe we'll get a couple of more late winners. And we did that season, but we also dropped points 3 times in draws, and I think we lost, 2-1 in the post-split derby. So now the other thing I wanted to do, if we may, can I let Alan comment on that. I'm sorry. And then I wanted to revert back to another concept. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely spot on. We're in the perilous zone, and I publish a range of tables that try to put numbers behind this concept of variance, expected goals difference. After this weekend, big spoiler. Well, a little bit of a spoiler for putting it out later, but big switch around really because of that single game at Ibrox, and the two Glasgow teams are really just edging towards that +1 XG differential on a 6-game rolling basis, which is the minimum really that you need. But my feeling is, especially when the fixtures get more tense and the quality of depth that James mentioned kicks in after the split, I'd be surprised if anyone consistently gets to that 1 XG mark and maintains it. I think it will. I think Rangers may well, given if they persist with this sort of Leipzig model, I think that's a model that allows them to put their best players in on the pitch. So it's probably a good thing for them. I don't think it's perfect. There was huge gaping holes all over the place, actually, in their game. But they created plenty of chances and they were reasonably defensively solid as well. But even having said all that, because of the depth of the league, there will be continuing to be drop points, I think, all over the place. So this is where we are now. This is our reality till the end of the season. And we need to be for Celtic to control their own destiny, we need to really start to address some of the weaknesses that we've talked about that were apparent over the last few games, especially in central midfield and just defensively, the defensive shape. Because even the pressing is not as good as it was under Rodgers. It was excellent. It's kind of gone downhill. Some of that's down to personnel, but some of it's down to maybe it's just not as much of a focus. I think the focus is on getting the ball forward quicker, which again, I don't intellectually or morally or anything like that have any issue with that as such. Just do it as long as it makes sense and we do it well. Then that's the only thing I'd ask. So, but yeah, long story short, I don't see there being any change to the situation that we're currently in, where every week massive variances can affect the top of the table quite dramatically because no one's dominant and they're not going to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you bring up the split and everything because I was having this very conversation with somebody not that long ago. So, as a Celtic supporter, the split is basically an irrelevance usually. Like it's called the Championship group after the split, but actually, the other teams in the group very rarely have an impact on how your season goes. But the idea this season in particular that our last few games of the season, our last 5 games of the season are going to be against Rangers, Hearts, Hibs, Falkirk and Motherwell, or some variation thereof. I've never worried so much about the potential for dropping points as this season. So, and that's bearing in mind the fact that we're not. It's as much to do with the fact that we're not playing well as it is to do with the fact that some of the other teams, Motherwell and Falkirk, I think particularly are two of my favourites to watch, have been so outstanding this season. But James, I'll hand back over to you because you had another sort of tangent you wanted to go on.
Yeah, just real quick. And I put out a piece on huddlebreakdown.com today talking about outliers, and we've been clustering in outliers this season, and it's been persistent all season across all 3 managers, including both tenures of Martin O'Neill. So whether it's, obviously getting knocked out by Kairat, which was, diabolical outlier of historic proportions, being knocked out by a team of that profile, to losing 2-0 at Dundee, which was, again, just a diabolically bad game. The loss away to Midtjylland was, we went over that at the time. Like Midtjylland did to us what PSG and Barcelona did at peak levels when they were whooping us 7-0 and 7-1. Like the internals of the game, the degree with which they obviously they don't have as good of players as Messi and Mbappe, but the guts of the game was that level of being dominated. And then there's the losing 6 out of 8 games debacle under Nancy. Then we have 54, depending on crosses, against Livingston, a horrible Livingston team that we have to shell, 50-some crosses into the box trying to score. That was the most I had. Alan, I think, said it. It was the second most that he has in his history of data. Huge outlier. Well, this is another outlier from, let me get this one. Yep. So again, apologies for people who are listening. If you're looking at this is basically looking at open play shots and non-penalty shots conceded by Celtic over the last 8 seasons. And the worst one, way out to the upper right-hand corner, was that debacle against Rangers last January in the 3-0, which was, arguably one of the worst performances of recent history domestically. In that diabolical game. The rest of the clustering are other games against Rangers, as one would expect maybe, are games against Rangers at Ibrox, where we're conceding somewhere around 17, 18 shots, non-penalty shots, and open play kind of 10 to 12 to 14. All right. So there's a group in that cluster that are not Rangers games. And so I've drawn those out so that we can look at what they were and when they happened. So in the chronological order, the first was the 2018 game against Lennon's Hibs. People remember that barnstormer at Celtic Park when Lenny's Hibs tried to go toe-to-toe, and it was a wonderfully exciting 4-2 game. And you could see the XG for and against there of 3.14 and 1.95. So we gave up a lot of shots, yes, and some good chances. They scored a couple of good goals, but usually when you give a talented Celtic team that much in chances, it's not going to work out real good for you. And so we won that game 4-2. The second one is the January post-Dubai game against Hibs in 2021, when we fielded basically a B team, where we conceded something like 16 shots against Hibs. The next one is Kilmarnock away, Rugby Park, in November of 2024. And I would argue that was the inflection point of when things started to change for Celtic, that we're still kind of, feeling the effects from. That was the game after, I believe, immediately after the RB Leipzig win in the Champions League. And then shortly after that, we drew to Aberdeen, and we, started to have some more difficulty. Drew to Bruges, drew away to Dynamo Zagreb, and things just started to get a lot more dicey, including the cup final against Rangers that we pulled out in penalties, and then led to that debacle, obviously, at the New Year's or the festive period fixture. The next three are all this season. The first one being the now infamous Wilfred Nancy game at Dundee United, when we lost 2-1, and then the last couple of weeks where we drew 2-2 at Hearts, and that great comeback win against Kilmarnock, 3-2 last weekend. So the reason why I'm sharing this is I find it concerning that these outliers are all kind of clustering, and it doesn't seem to be getting better to this degree where we're conceding this volume of shots. And, when Alan talks about, and I mentioned, issues like control, if one of the hallmarks, and this was what I called kind of pick your poison of, if we persisted or if Brendan Rodgers stuck around and we kind of had the horseshoe of death. My concern was we would have just kind of like 17-18 season, and then into part of his tenure in the 18-19 season, a lot of scoreless draws, a lot of 1-1s. But the upside of that is you don't give up a lot of chances. You give up maybe 3, 4, or 5 shots a game to the opposition. When you are surrendering 10, 12, 15 shots against teams of any level, just by definition, you're going to have games when they top shelf, like Dundee United did in December, or like Kilmarnock has a hot striker that had some great finishes on the weekend. So this is alarming to me that this continues to kind of persist, and it's persisting against teams of this quality, these levels. And in fact, it's persisting across the managers, different styles of play. I remember all the way back in December when conceding this number of shots to this level of team was considered, horrible defending, and how can you play 3 at the back, and right. So all those things might have been true at the time, but we just conceded 16, 17 shots to Kilmarnock. I mean, and if we continue to play like this with this openness and the ease with which teams are playing through us at times, which has been the issue with midfield dating back over a year now. That's why I call it that inflection point, because that turning point in autumn of 2024 was when the Bruges model emerged, and man marking of McGregor in the midfield and all these things that have helped us become very vulnerable at times, depending on how the opposition set up. That's when it really took hold. It's just been progressively getting more difficult to respond to it. So that's a transition to this easy fixture that we have coming up against Stuttgart, who are just the best matchup we could ever have in having to worry about these issues.
Yeah, we'll go on to Stuttgart in a wee second. Alan, just to round up the domestic chat for this week, do you share James's concern, and where do you think it leaves us in terms of, how likely we are to be the victors on the run-in?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why, to come back to, as James says, choose your poison. I said that really, for me personally, it would be a case of at least have control, at least limit the shots and the chances of the opposition. And if it means conceding a few draws and not winning some games, it being a bit dull in that sense, is it preferable to having these basketball matches that we've seen the last few weeks, where the likes of Dundee and Livingston and Kilmarnock have got nearly one or more XG, have had several shots, and we've only won through late goals. Now, that might have been the case if you controlled the game and played the horse of death. You might have been in that position where you're level with a minute to go. I absolutely accept that. Martin O'Neill's response to that is to be more direct, to be more on the front foot, to get the ball forward quicker. But the Scottish League model, we always criticise, or we tend to criticise the administrators in our country, and generally rightly so. But the split is actually a really good thing generally for the competitiveness of the league. And when you're in a situation like this, where Celtic are not running away with the league, mainly because there isn't the talent gap, that's basically what it comes down to. Every team, there's 3 or 4 teams fighting relegation. So even your so-called easier matches going up to the split are difficult, because the likes of St Mirren, Livingston, etc., fighting for their lives. Because again, it's not. I know it's not like losing your place in the English Premier League, but on a relative basis, clubs in Scotland, the relegation to the Championship is a big hit financially. And you've got teams trying to get into the top 6, teams trying to stay in the top 6. You've still got 5 European spots available next season. That probably goes down to 4 the season after. So all of that's in play, and all these teams are fighting for it. So there's going to be no easy matches. And because we don't have the talent gap, it means there's jeopardy in every game. That makes it a really good league. The split is a good thing. All these teams playing each other. When the title is close and the relegation battle is close, that split works brilliantly. And in terms of, it really showcases the honesty and integrity of the league. Everyone tries their best. I mean, Italian football has been plagued forever for teams who get to the end of the season, they've got nothing to play for, so they don't. And it's that's pretty poor experience for supporters, I guess. Never mind the potential for dubious betting and all sorts of things. But I think the Scottish League has got really exciting because of that split. But the bad news is we're right in the middle of that battle. We don't have the historical, resource-driven quality gap, and therefore that's why I'm so meticulously tracking all of the variance factors, because it's fun to see, and it's educating, I hope, to show people this is what real football's like when it's a league with relative parity. These non-controllable factors have an enormous influence, and they're going to continue to have, and it really will be the team that can rise above that a little bit, who can be reasonably consistent at both ends, start scoring goals, not conceding any, whilst maintaining positive, or at least neutral at worst, profile as far as variance outcomes, that will probably prevail. In the moment, as we sit here today, that's looking like the team from Ibrox, sadly. And that's the challenge in front of Martin O'Neill, as to how can we get greater consistency into our performances, less jeopardy towards our own goal, and more consistency in finishing. Easy to say.
I do worry. I do worry that the momentum is with Rangers at the moment, for whatever significance you give that. But fingers crossed. I've seen us. I was about to say I've seen us win it from worse positions, but I don't know if I've seen us win it with a worse team than we've got at the moment, and that's probably the major concern. Let's move on to Thursday night and the first leg of our Europa League game against Stuttgart. James, I was doing a cursory look at Stuttgart before the show and a little bit during the show. And I do not profess to be an expert by any means in the Bundesliga, but they look like a bit of a basket case to me. Like they're in fourth, but they've scored 41 goals, but they've conceded 29. They've only got a plus 12 goal difference. And they seem to have had some pretty wacky results in terms of absolutely tanking some teams, getting absolutely tanked off other teams. I mean, what's your assessment of what we're going to face on Thursday night? Because I have to say, I feel like I know less about them having looked at it than I thought I did before.
Yeah, I think, if we were where we should be, then this is a tie that I wouldn't be scared of. It would be a decent matchup for us, mostly because I think this is a team that is going to play out from the back. They have some vulnerabilities of being pressed themselves. They're not world-class Real Madrid being able to just dicky-dack around our Ange team pressing and just kind of laugh at you and pass around you. They can be got at. And so
just to jump in there, the Hazard goal came up the other day against us, and it was a total accident, by the way. It was nothing to do with Celtic. It was one of these random football accounts that just posted this goal, and I was watching it thinking, that is a brilliant goal. Hang on, that's us. One of those, but anyway.
Right, where you feel like you're just being toyed with a little bit. So obviously they're nowhere near that level. I think even within the Europa League this season, where they've been one of the better teams. So again, I'm not underselling them. They are, for this tournament, they're right there behind, Aston Villa. Aston Villa is probably a level above, and then you got a little group of the Stuttgart level, and so they're a good quality team that I don't think we should be fearing. Having said that, the way we're performing right now, unless we're going to revert back to having our press be really functional and quality, which has been in Europe to their credit. I mean, that's been a strength relative, even against Bologna, going back to the Feyenoord game. So we've shown the ability to do that. I don't know if we've got the striker to do that now. That was one of the things that Johnny Kenny did bring to the table. It was a pretty quick, vigilant presser. I don't think Chvankara is quick enough, and I don't think Adamu is quick or fast enough. He's a willing presser. He's been in pressing sides, but also in much more athletic sides than we have that were around him. So I'm concerned with our personnel available, whether we're able to kind of press the gas like we have effectively at this level. If we are able to do that, then I think we can give Stuttgart problems. I think we can get in behind them. They try to play a very high line. They are vulnerable in the channels, so I can see Maeda getting a channel ball and getting in 1v1 against the keeper. Will he finish? That's always the fun.
No, I was going to say, what happens next?
Right. Even Chvankara, I mean, he can get in behind. He can make really good channel runs as well. So I see, I'm not hopeless in this sense because I see ways that we can hurt them. But I also don't have the optimism that we're going to be at a high level in that regard. And there's a lot of ways that they can hurt us because they're, a level above us, if not two, as far as quality on the ball, midfield. They've generally been playing 4-2-3-1 since their winter break. They play a little bit more three-man, 3-4-2-1, 3-4-1-2 at times before the winter break for them. So I'm guessing they'll go 4-2-3-1 and then 4-4-2 out of possession. But their midfield's been good. They have a guy they've just been playing at the number 10. Again, to draw an analogy, he was signed by USG from the 3rd division of German football. If that echoes with anyone who just been watching Rangers recently, who went to USG and then ended up at Stuttgart, I think, for 25 million. Undav, he was, I think, 21 or 22 when USG signed him. So he's been playing as kind of nominal number 10 the last couple of games. So they have quality. They have good players. if we were fully fit and firing, I would say it would be more analogous to like the Feyenoord matchup. So I could see ways that we could get some joy, but I don't think we're there anymore, unfortunately. So particularly with Engels out, I'm quite concerned.
It's funny you mentioned Feyenoord. And this is for anybody who thinks, by the way, that I've been accused online of like faking my interest in football. I don't know why I would do that, but I was sitting as you do on a Sunday or whatever day it was last week, watching Feyenoord versus Go Ahead Eagles. One of the worst matches of football I think I've watched all season. Absolutely terrible. So I would have taken either of those two. But anyway, Alan, I hate to be a user of a football cliche listening to the podcast I do, but maybe it was a bit unfair in my introduction. As James says, these are no mugs. They are in the Champions League spots in Germany. They are above teams like RB Leipzig and Leverkusen in the table. So it's not as if we're playing a kind of second string or basement German team. They have quality and they have talent. And it's, I guess, a question of whether we can overcome that. What's your thoughts on our ability to do that?
Yeah, if the Brendan Rodgers thing hadn't happened and he was still here, these would be two very similar teams in terms of style of play. The way that Brendan Rodgers had Celtic playing is very similar to how we were playing. So think about what was the kryptonite for that Celtic team under Rodgers, and we might have a chance if we can replicate that. So yeah, maybe quite a compact mid-block. I think will Martin O'Neill play a counter-attacking game at home? He's got some of the tools to do that. That's where a forward line that started at Kilmarnock could actually be more effective than against Kilmarnock, deployed against Stuttgart, even at home, playing that sort of counter-attacking game, balls over the top or through the channels, and being compact off the ball. That, I think, would be our best hope, because otherwise this is a team that at Europa League level has generated twice the shots, almost twice the XG that Celtic has in those games against that level of opposition, and been reasonable defensively as well. Maybe like Bayern Munich last year, they'll underestimate Celtic a little bit. That could be something else you could maybe hope for, because as you say, they're going for the Champions League spot in Germany. So the German league, I think it's only 34 matches in the Bundesliga, so it's not, you don't have millions of fixtures. They can't have that many left, I wouldn't have thought. That would be, but that's obviously things outside of our control. But yeah, that's the way I would look at it. Really, is think about the kryptonite that Celtic under Rodgers would have not wanted to play against. And I think O'Neill, to be fair, is probably a manager who quite relishes being in this situation as the underdog and having to set up a team to be a little bit more difficult to beat against a superior opponent. That was how he flourished at Leicester City, and that's how he had success in Europe with Celtic to some extent as well. So I think it'll be tactical. It'll be really interesting to see how he does it. I don't think he'll do a Rodgers and just think, oh, we could just play our own game and stand toe to toe. I don't think he'll do that. I think we might see a few little tactical tweaks. Maybe a bit more, maybe the more direct style of play, getting in behind them early, I think is something we'll see.
Yeah, and that might be wise, because I think I saw out of all of the teams, what is it, 36, I guess, now in the Europa League league phase, 32 or 36. They are last in the volume of pressures. Now some of that's they haven't had crazy possession. I think they're third in possession at like 59%.
Average.
Yeah, 59. So it's high possession, but not crazy. But they're number one in creating shots off of their high press. So if you have the least amount of pressures, that's a huge concern, because and I watched some of it, some clips on it and phases of play to try to ascertain what they're doing. They're going to set up traps and basically dare our center backs to do something on the ball. And that's, as I've said for quite some time now, that's kind of the kryptonite model that leads us down a dark path at times of turnovers and opposition teams just running right at us in numbers after we've turned the ball over in midfield. So going direct I'm normally not in favor of that domestically. But in this kind of circumstance, as it ended up being against Bologna, as it, against Atalanta last season, I think there's a time and a place when you might get overwhelmed. And my concern is that they might overwhelm us with their ability to kind of negate us getting through midfield. Unless Oxlade-Chamberlain is a savior, which he might be. We'll see.
Little quiz question for you to round out the day.
Oh, he's not even in the squad. I'm sorry. There we go. He's really going to be a savior if he can show up from not being in the squad. I'm sorry, Laura. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're fine. You're fine. Little quiz question for you to end the show. Dennis Undav, who you were vociferously praising there, is third in the Bundesliga scoring charts. Can you name the two players who are above him?
Well, Harry Kane for all those penalties.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
26
him
he's
and
on.
Tavpen, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All those penalties. He's been outstanding, Harry Kane. Let's be fair to him.
I'll give you a clue.
Absolutely.
The other player is also a Bayern Munich player.
I was going to Olise, maybe?
Nope.
No.
Musiala? He's been injured, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's been out. Yeah.
Nope.
Oh, Carl? Is it Carl?
No, ex-Premier League
young
player.
Kid. In that case, it would be Luis Diaz.
Luis Diaz, correct.
Yeah.
Ex-Liverpool player Luis Diaz is on 13 goals. Dennis Undav is on 12. And Harry Kane is on 26 goals. How many of those are penalties? I've no idea, but he's going to win England the World Cup anyway.
So quick, Luis Diaz. So listening to Libero, which is a podcast I'd recommend, and Rory Smith of the Athletic.
He's great, yeah.
Was in New York for the World Cup draw, and believe it or not, and they were talking about how football has really permeated American. It's now pretty mainstream, actually, even amongst normal folk. Like, we're talking about stories about people talking about it on the underground and kids discussing it when they.
It's called the Subway, Alan. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. It's the Subway. But go ahead.
So
it's called football. It's not called soccer.
Adidas flagship store on Broadway, right, has got giant pictures of 3 footballers on the front. Lionel Messi, obviously. But the other 2, one of them was Luis Diaz, because there's just such a huge Colombian expat community. There is. I mean, Luis Diaz probably isn't one of the best 50 footballers in the world, but in terms of the profile for, I went to a Scotland game in New York for the '98 World Cup and played Colombia, and it was at the stadium they're having the final at. I think it's the one in New Jersey, but it's New York.
Meadowlands.
And although, as always, there was tons of Scotland fans there, it was I don't know how much that stadium holds, 60,000, 70,000, whatever it was. It was just full of Colombians. I go, are they absolutely mental? They were brilliant, actually. They were great fun. So anyway, sorry, long boring anecdotes about Luis Diaz and Colombians in New York.
I'm just counting on to the fact, Alan, are you telling me you've seen Carlos Valderrama in the flesh?
Yes, I have, yeah. Being chased around the field by Christian Daly.
I mean, wow.
Christian Daly was Scotland's best player that day, actually, easily.
Christian Daly's one of those players who always used to turn up for Scotland, and I could never tell you what club he played for. But it was just always there. It was weird.
Yeah, he could play literally any position.
Yeah, well, I think that's a matter of opinion, but anyway. James, I'll pass over to you to do the usual plug at the end of the show. Tell us what's available on the Substack, how people can find it, how they can support the show. Yeah,
so Alan and I have weekly columns, so a lot of the content on huddlebreakdown.com is actually written along with the second podcast that we do, Extra Time, later in the week, where we do more deep dive analysis, a lot more graphics and videos and good stuff that we dive deep into games. So yeah, and Alan, I think with what he's come up with the Speedboat League is really excellent in breaking out the horse race and attributing what elements of the games is, driving results versus underlying performance. So I think we've been getting a lot of good feedback from subscribers on how that's improving their understanding of what the hell it is we're all watching. So it's stuff like that we're able to bring to the audience. And we appreciate everyone that supports us. Yeah,
thank you very much. Speedboats and horses, all you need for your
leprechauns. I think you added leprechauns. Cultural appropriator.
It's a potpourri of cultural references that don't really work together.
Careful, Alan. It's 2026. We're going to get cancelled here. But no, thank you everybody for watching and or listening. Even if you can't support us financially, if you want to click subscribe on the YouTube channel, that is a great help as well. Thank you, James, and thank you, Alan. We'll see you all next week. I am away to be the football hipster that I am and choose Dortmund via Atlanta for the Champions League rather than any of the more glamorous
That's what I was going to watch too. Yeah, I think that's the best game. Agreed.
I just need to convince my dad now, but we'll see. Right. Bye, everybody.